north and south, get back to our reservation from,
Like someone said earlier, the state line actually splits where my reservation. I'm out of Pocatello, Idaho, but our headquarters office is in Ogden. We have lands on both sides of the line, but this question that is asked is, how do you work with rural communities? We are rural. If you look at the map that was presented in Nevada and the state of Utah, where the 8 tribes are at, every one of these, the tribes and their reservations are in a rural area. When you think about it, back in the day when they were placing us on these reservations, they wanted us out of places where, like Salt Lake Valley, where the water was at. So they put us out there in the deserts, they put us out in barren lands. Come to find out decades later, or even 100 years later, there's natural resources underneath that property that's owned by a lot of reservations or adjacent to. We have been approached many times over about how do you get involved with the tribes? How do you do business activities? And fortunately for my tribe, we have a tribal council that is that is forward thinking about economic development. We've been doing this for a couple of decades. It was developed a long time ago when I first came on tribal council. We're not open, or we're not closed to not hearing anything. We're just about the amount of respect that my colleague here has talked about when it comes to working with tribes. Obviously, I've seen a presentation where it seems like when the dollar says go, you have to go. Obviously, it's a little different when you have to work with a tribe, because being a democracy, we fluctuate. Our tribal councils fluctuate. 7 people that were on there this year may not be on there next year. Some tribes are like that, and if you do, you have to relearn. It's a relearning curve when you get new folks on there. Fortunately for my council, my people, we've been fairly consistent on what we do. So our mission moving forward is, always respect the land, but then we understand at the end of the day, we have to be able to take care of our people. By that, I mean money coming in to help care for the health and well-being of our citizens, which is in our state, which is in our tribal constitution, as opposed to the state constitution, which says the same thing, just different wording. So I do appreciate the question, but then these are just some topics that we've been asked over many years about how we deal with this. So it's nothing new. I think it's about just getting the relationship, building that networking, and meeting other folks who are trying to do betterment for their tribe. So I'm encouraged to see the UNR, how you guys study the Native Nations. I'm actually a student of that. That was part of my degree many moons ago. So it's encouraging to see, and I do hope that all of us can, uplift ourselves to better our tribes and the people we work for. So thank you.
Thank you, Sheldon.
Yes, okay, we're good to go. If you haven't noticed, I'm not native. So I kind of hit this from a different approach. I'm an economic development guy out there in northeastern Nevada, in rural Nevada. And one thing that I always say is we don't have the luxury to be exclusive. So you say, why is this important? I think there's this idea that the further you get out into the rurals, you deal with more racism and exclusivity and things like that. That's nonsense. And let me paint a picture for you. So I cover Lander, Eureka, Elko, and White Pine counties. That's 40,000 square miles. That's the size of Kentucky. All right. I think they got us beat by like 200 square miles, something like that. We have 80,000 people. So that's 2 people per square mile. So as you can imagine, you start running the numbers. From an economic development perspective, we need everybody involved in the process. And so as a result, we do everything we can to try to include everybody in the conversations. Have we always been good about that? Absolutely not. In some situations we have. Now, across the region, my 4-county region, by and large, on the average, we might have 1,500 people unemployed. So anytime we're talking about new developments and so on and so forth, it's a situation where we just absolutely have to include everybody into that conversation. Now, in light of the natural resources or critical minerals and aerospace and defense. Jason, right? Yeah, so as Jason mentioned, we're rural because of the way everything was set up. And so it comes with its challenges, and I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but it also comes with some tremendous assets. And so as we're realizing, especially in our area, we're seeing more lithium deposits being proved out, as well as things like vanadium, which has been a part of the battery storage conversation for about a decade. And all of these resources are located near tribal entities. And so, and the feedback that we're getting from the tribes in my area, which include about 4 different tribes and another handful of bands within those tribes, is that they want to be self-sustaining. And rightfully so. I think all of our rural communities want to be self-sustaining as well. And so trying to determine the best way to go about that and how to set ourselves up for success in light of that. And the main motivator that we're getting from folks that are living in those areas is that all of their youngsters are leaving. And so one of our biggest exporters in northeastern Nevada is people, whether tribal or not. And so creating opportunities in these areas where they can get back to the communities and the land that that they feel close to is of course important. And so as a result of that, I mean, we find that as a critical factor. I'm going to be very general, saying we just need everybody. And by and large in northeastern Nevada, we do pretty well at that. So I'm going to stop there and leave the rest for some of the other questions.
Thank you, Sheldon. James?
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm James Toledo with the Utah Division of Indian Affairs, and I really appreciate the panel's perspectives and just kind of building upon that. You know, our office, we're a state agency, so we work with state government as well as the 8 tribes here in Utah. And through my interactions and working with the division, we're constantly presented with opportunities with economic engagement, where organizations, businesses want to engage and build relations with tribes. And I think the panel kind of really hit on it is, you know, number one, workforce development. The communities are out there in rural Utah. They want to stay close to home. As many of those who live here in Salt Lake City or where you're from, you want your family and stuff to live close by. As the same as goes with people who live in rural or tribal communities. And so bringing the jobs to them, these are high-paying jobs, looking for those opportunities are there. There's a workforce that wants to learn. There's a workforce that wants to stay close to home as much as possible to retain that connection to their home areas. Also, you know, I think we'll probably get into this a little bit more later in the discussion, is just kind of really emphasizing tribal consultation. You know, I think that's going to be a key component, because with tribal consultation, you're identifying what are the community's needs. You know, okay, so you come to the community with an opportunity, how is that opportunity going to benefit that community? You know, the leadership that are there, you know, what's their stake in this opportunity? How are they going to benefit from the opportunity? So all those questions can be addressed through that consultation process. It does take time. So, you know, oftentimes you're going to have to learn how a new governmental structure works. But investing your time and having more interactions with the community is going to pay dividends long term as that project continues to build and you're seeing those connections. Then you're starting to build trust at the same time. You know, I think trust is going to be something that needs to be established. You know, an organization comes to the community, they have no idea what your intentions are. And so through that consultation process, those questions and things are starting to get addressed, and so you're able to really address those challenges that were discussed earlier. You know, so you're able to foresee those challenges and maybe work towards addressing it to where it's not going to be, it still may be a challenge, but it's not going to be a brick wall. It might be a speed bump, and so you'll be able to work through those obstacles as they come up. So that's what I have to share. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you so much. So the next question, and it kind of just expands on some of the things that you all just touched on. So we'll start with Jason. When it comes to effectively and efficiently engaging with rural and tribal communities, what are the major challenges that each of you have encountered and what others might encounter?
Yeah, so one of the big ones is the buy-in that everyone has basically been talking about. Just an example, sanitation, for example. You have some folks that live within exterior boundaries of the reservation but don't like the tribe. And then it was like, so you don't want to pay for sanitation service, but who picks up your trash? Well, you do, but you don't want to pay us, you want to pay the county, which has nothing to do with this. Then they start seeing some of it because it's where they live. So you have to get the buy-in on that, and it doesn't happen overnight, trust me. It takes decades for people to, it's just how people were raised about, this and that, whatever, you have to change some of the, just some of the thinking that I've seen. Fortunately, I like to talk a lot. It's been good and it's been bad, but doing this for a long time, you get the feel for these things. It's fortunate going off, leaving your homelands to go get a piece of paper that says you kind of know what you're talking about. It's something that was big as well. So coming back and doing these, and then it's just having that way of getting to know people, getting to say, hey, we all live under this same sky. We drink the same water, smell the same air, so breathe the same air. So it's just getting that buy-in, and then I'm not talking only non-native, but just if you're from a different family within your own tribe, you could be an outcast. So it's sometimes it's tough, but just having that the relationship and just getting to know people that you're able to work together for the same mission. That's the best way I know how to put it.
Thank you, and so I think it's important, what I gathered out of that was a couple of things, but one is, tribes are their own entity, they're their own sovereign nation, and so their jurisdictional structures, their governmental structures might be different than what folks are used to, and so that's kind of really important to make sure that people understand. All right, Sheldon.
Okay, so I can think of kind of two things that we've experienced right off the top. So the first being the trust issues. And I think not so much due to historical injustices, but actually things that have happened within, the last few years. And what I mean by that is oftentimes what we see is folks come to the tribal council or community because they want to leverage them for some reason. And it's like, hey, we're trying to get some grant or whatever, and if we're going to be able to get this money, we've got to check a tribal box. And then at the end of the day, the tribe finds out that there's really no benefit to them, or that they just get neglected and overlooked. And so you do that a couple of times, and pretty soon they stop answering your phone calls, like you say. And so that's really difficult. So what's really important is, like with any collaboration, is establishing trust and establishing a real relationship. You don't just go out once a year to check a box. You actually, engage, learn about a person's family. And this resonates with any community because, quite frankly, our rural communities feel that way a lot of times too. I can't tell you how many times some organization reached out to me and said, hey, we would like to partner with you for some silly reason, and and then come to find out they were getting some grant and they had to check a rural Nevada box. And so I get it. So trust, that's a big one. Number two, I think that I've noticed, and you mentioned, Daphne, with the small governments, is when those governments change, when those elections take place and a new elder's brought forth within the council. And like any other small community, there's there's a lot of tension sometimes. Like, well, my family doesn't like your family, and and I mean, for Pete's sakes, I'm telling you, in small towns, there might be a policy that doesn't get passed because somebody slept with somebody else's girlfriend in high school, and it was 20 years ago, and now you're coming up. And I mean, if you live in a small town, you know how that works. So heaven help you if you were a little too cavalier in high school. But you see some of that in the tribal communities as well, and it's like, well, this is going on, and I get it because that's what happens in small communities. But sometimes it really creates challenges, and about the time you start building that relationship with that new leadership, then it's election time, and it's time to switch them out. And shoot, here we go, square one. So I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, James.
Thank you. Kind of just building on what has already shared, I'll kind of add in the jurisdictional or rights of way as a challenge. And, I think those opportunities, as me representing state government, I would say utilize your state government partners. Oftentimes, state government can help in addressing and trying to expedite those challenges as quickly as it possibly can. For example, with the Navajo Nation this has kind of been in the news recently with a small community called Westwater, and it's a small community that's just east of or west of Blanding City in San Juan County, and it's a Navajo community. It's not part of the reservation, so it's a simple fee land, and I guess this community did not have running water or electricity, and so literally it's just like a small little ravine that's you cross, and there's a town that has all the amenities that we all enjoy, and so I use this as an example because Lieutenant Governor Henderson really got everyone involved, the right people at the table from both the tribal government side, county government, city government, and state government. Everyone came to the table, had a couple of meetings, planning meetings. Okay, what are the challenges? What are the obstacles? How can we overcome this? And so, in the scope of about 2.5 years, that community now has electricity and they have running water. I believe they're having a dedication for the running water later this month. But that's just an example of how utilizing, in this case, state government can work as a partner in helping you overcome obstacles and challenges when it comes to rights of way, when it comes to jurisdictional issues. And in part of all of that too is keeping tribes involved throughout that process, keeping them updated, having points of contacts within the government, say, hey, this is what's happening, this is the status of where this project is going, and so tribal government is not caught off guard. And so this ties back into that consultation piece. So consultation isn't just having 1 or 2 meetings and you're done and you check the box and you move on. No, it's keeping that government informed of what is happening. How is their feedback influencing the decisions that are being made as that project moves forward? And so again, I guess I'll just kind of be re-emphasizing the importance of consultation. And consultation is going to be, it's not a one-size-fits-all either, because you are working with different governments. One tribal government may operate one way and another one might do things slightly different. And so you have to adapt, you have to tailor your approach to the governments that you're working with. And so again, that's where that ongoing communication is going to be critically important when you're working to address issues and wanting to get this project done within the timeline that you're working with.
Thank you, James. I think you brought up something that's really important. Sometimes when we're working on projects or developments or just anything, I think we often forget that some communities still lack infrastructure, the levels of poverty, the levels of social issues, whatever it might be, really exist. And I think it's important for people to just remember that. I mean, if we have a community that doesn't have running water, it's really hard for them to think about, do you want to build a warehouse, right? Or what does that look like? Because those are real life issues that folks face. Thank you. Andrea.
Can you restate the question again? I thought about a whole bunch of things as we were talking.
Yeah, sure. So the question is, when it comes to effectively and efficiently engaging rural and tribal communities, what are the major challenges that you face?
So as my term in chairman, obviously we had many companies coming to us because Nevada was like the hub for clean energy projects, lithium mining critical minerals, etc. And we also had it on both sides of the spectrum. We had the mining companies, we had the lithium companies, we had solar companies, but then we had the environmental justice people. We had all of these people feeding us a lot of this information, and sometimes these things were put on record and sometimes they weren't, because the tribal nations, if they're going to put something on record, then they have to pay their council members to do that. And if a tribal nation doesn't have the money to do that, they don't want to hold those official meetings where they're going to have to pay out all the time on behalf of these people who are trying to come and consult us. So and then we would call roundtables. Oh, well, this is a roundtable, it's not really official, so we're just gonna get together, and then the council members don't show up, or the community doesn't show up, and then there's no engagement. So it was kind of a lose-lose situation. And also what I experienced as well is there was a company who jumped to the last step. They went straight to the chairman. They're like, this is what we're gonna do. Can we do it? Here's a paper, sign this. And because the tribe didn't have these policies and processes into place, the chairman at that time, that person was new, signed this thing, and this company did the environmental process. They went through all of these stages, and then as council members came in and were like, okay, how did this happen? Where is it? Why isn't it on record? And then that company lost the trust of the tribal government. But then a bigger company comes to us and they're like, this is what we're doing, this is how much land, it was gonna take up more land, it was gonna be a longer process, but because they engaged early and often, they built that trust with the tribe. And the tribe continued to work with them and continue to have open communication to them, continue to respond to them, to call them back because they engaged early and often. But then also on the tribal side, we realized that we need to put policies into place. We need to put procedures in place. We need to implement consultation into our tribal law so that we can give something to these people, these agencies, these on both sides of the spectrum again. This is how we do this process. So it's clear to everybody because every tribe is different, as it was stated before, but it is also the responsibility of the tribe to be like, hey, here it is. And and it's crazy that the company who jumped those hurdles was the one who came back and asked, do you have a policy or process that we could see? And I was like, you know what, we actually don't, because I came in after that chairman who did that. And so then we established those things, we started those things. And then offering, hey, we will pay for this consultation, or we will pay for your time, because their time and their knowledge is valuable to them. And if you treat them with that same respect, they'll give it back.
Yeah, building partnerships, right? And really understanding what structures exist, because everything's a little bit different. So that kind of leads into our third question. And Sheldon, we're going to start with you. So what are the opportunities for rural or tribal community outreach and engagement in the context of economic development? And you can just expand on kind of what we've been talking about and why should we engage with these communities?
Sure. So I think you hit the why in the first one, so I'm just gonna avoid that one. But the opportunities. So I think by and large, from my perspective, is that is just being proactive in determining what the tribe is really looking for and what they want. And in light of the industries we're talking about, whether natural resource extraction or value-added mining or aerospace and defense, these are actually prime locations for a lot of that. And so the first step, I would say, is engaging each tribal entity and determining which areas or which lands nearby are not sensitive, right? So that we don't have to necessarily be surprised later on. And the reason I say that is because especially as it pertains to aerospace and defense. So Nevada is an aerospace and defense state. We have Area 51, we've got the U.S. Air Force Fighter Weapons School, we've got Fallon Naval Air Station, Top Gun, right? For me though, none of it's in my area. And so, as a veteran, I understand the importance of operational security. And as Jason mentioned, his tribe's out in the middle of nowhere. What great place, or these entities, these communities are out in the middle of nowhere. What a great place to have some of these facilities so that you can ensure there's not a lot of encroachment and not a lot of peering eyes as far as that goes. And I can see these small communities really capitalizing on that and having more employment opportunities and being a part of that process. And Daphne, I appreciate what you mentioned early on about these arbitrary borders and lines and so forth. And where I'm at, northeastern Nevada, from an economic, cultural perspective, we have a lot more in common with northern Utah and southern Idaho than we do with our brethren in Reno and Las Vegas. There's just no two ways about it. I was born and raised in southern Idaho. I was made in northern Nevada, and of course I hang out in Utah from time to time. So we have a lot in common, and unfortunately we don't always work together to capitalize on opportunities that exist. I know over in the West Wendover area, they're preparing to transfer about 6,000 to 7,000 acres of government land that can be utilized for economic development, and there are tribal stakeholders involved in that. But none of that will really reach its pinnacle unless you're utilizing the Wendover airfield and things like that. And so too many times we just don't have those conversations because of these imaginary lines and so forth. So we kind of got to get around that. But I see a lot of opportunity in these industries and in this space, but it's just a matter of being proactive and saying, what do you see? What's your vision? Whether it's a tribal community or whether it's just a deep rural community, because they're the same. Sometimes they just don't want to see change, or that big of change. And so determining what those factors are at the onset certainly saves a lot of time in the back end. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Sheldon. James, opportunities.
Opportunities for economic development, right?
Yep, through engagement.
So I think just kind of building, maybe earlier on the slide, introductions, it was talked about workforce development, also housing, having to bus people from great distances for the workforce that's there. So I think the opportunity is, tribal communities are there. Some of them are in very rural or even, very rural parts of the state. And there's a population that's there that wants to work. And so I just think there is opportunities for that workforce development, whether that's going into starting programs. Say you reach out to a local school district and you're saying, hey, we want to let young people know that, hey, there are good paying jobs in this industry. We would like to partner with you to develop a curriculum or develop a program that introduces young people to these opportunities so that they're able to take advantage of that while they're there. And then if they pursue and get all the credentials that they need, then they're living in those communities, and so they're there to, it probably costs overall as opposed to transporting workers from a town that's 70, 100 miles away. They're there, and you're building credibility within that community. You're establishing a presence, and so I just think there's a tremendous opportunity there. And I know here in Utah there's been several opportunities in San Juan County that's kind of hitting on that, where they are working with San Juan County School District in developing these types of programs to let young people know that, hey, these opportunities are here in terms of apprenticeships. Summer apprenticeship programs that get young people to work in the industry. They're job shadowing with other people who are already working there. And so it's giving them those opportunities, because not all kids want to go to college, and I think we're seeing a shortage of skilled trades now as we have a generation that's going into retirement, and they're not, they're going to be out of the workforce. And so there's a big, I guess you could say, a problem that's down the road, because you're not having a workforce that has the skills needed by the industry, and so it puts us back, then it puts us as a whole at a disadvantage. And so I think, you know, looking at rural and tribal communities, so that's my, I guess my answer to that is just the workforce development opportunities that are there. There is a workforce that wants to work, and some of them just may not know that hey, there's these opportunities exist in this industry, and I never thought of doing that. And so I just think as organizations or companies are looking to do that, just maybe reaching out to, you know, again, going back to whether it's with the tribal community, with consultation, understanding what are the community's needs. You know, okay, this is the community's needs, how can we provide a solution to that? And whether that's through training and providing educational opportunities, you know, developing a scholarship fund, you know, I think there are many opportunities that can come from those types of discussions.
Thank you. Andrea?
Okay, so with that, building workforce and the skills that are needed in our community, as a former tribal leader and business owner on our reservation, it's really hard to get the buy-in of the older generation. And that was something that broke my heart as a tribal leader and growing up in my community. And again, with the small rural communities, I found out everybody's dirty history while I was the chairman. I'm like, oh my gosh, because somebody didn't vote somehow and then all the dirty laundry would be aired out. But where I'm going with this is that then I started thinking, well, how can we shift this? Because it is about the future generation. It is about the future of our world and our economies and where we're going. And so I think a big focus should be the younger generation. How are we going to help them visualize what their future is going to look like? How are we going to help develop these people? So on these presentations today, I'm like, wow, these are the things that are needed, because one, it provides education. It shows them that, hey, our world is changing and we need to be prepared for that. And then two, what does your community look like for this? Because if we don't engage as a tribal nation and we don't get involved and we don't get educated and we're not also reaching out to people who want to come to our communities, we are going to be left behind again. And then finding that balance of, okay, how are we going to balance protecting our cultural resources, holding close to our morals and value, but still integrating into the world we live in today? And then that was kind of where I built Next Evolution Coffee Shop, because I felt that in my heart that, hey, yes, I hold these morals and values inside of me, and it's important to me. But our world is changing, our people are changing, the way we live is changing, how we need to think about the future is changing. So then I, again, turned it around strategically, and I'm like, okay, we need to focus on the youth, we need to focus on the next generation, what are we gonna provide for them to build them up into the world that they are going to be living in, because their minds and their thinking and the way they're living today, even today, is completely different than how I was living and how I grew up and where our world is going. And they want to learn about these new technologies and innovations and be involved in these new jobs. They want that. But I feel like rural communities, tribal nations, some tribal elders, and people that are older are holding them back. And then they're scared to want to engage into these things. They're scared to want to learn about them because they feel like they're going to be shunned from their people. But I think that by creating these spaces and allowing tribal people who want to be engaged in these conversations is really important, because there are people in our community like me and these other panelists up here who want to learn, who know that our world is moving fast and we need to keep up with that, because what's going to happen to our people if we don't? At least we'll have a seat at the table, we'll have a voice at the table, we'll be able to negotiate on what we want our future to look like. So I think engagement with the younger generations is super important.
Thank you. Jason?
Yeah. So I guess while this is starting, I'm just glad I wasn't raised around where Sheldon was at, or else my wife, I'd be mad at you. What we talked about earlier. So one of the opportunities that we see, and the former chairwoman has hit it right on the head, was the opportunity that you see with the economic development. Now, when we are thinking long-term about if these facilities are coming, where does housing go? Where do we don't have a supermarket. We don't have the capacity to have a health clinic to handle the traffic, and with more people, what does that come with? And we're seeing it now, are the drug and alcohol abuse problems. It's unfortunate when we have 80-something houses, travel homes, that's under the tribe's jurisdiction, and we lose about 4 to 10 houses per year to meth. And those houses are condemned. And, we have to think about that. We have to think about if all these people come to the area, what happens when the hole in the ground is gone and all the resources is gone? Empty homes. I mean, we've seen it up in Edmonton with the Onion Lake Cree Nation up there. They used to have massive houses back in the mid-1900s, and now they're all vacant because the natural resources go and everybody's left town. So we have to think about not only, because we're there, the tribes are not going to go anywhere, but what do we do when the party leaves? How do we recoup and redo how we think? The opportunity I always tell my kids and my students or my tribal members is, I always tell them, hey, go out and find your niche in this world, and then come back and help your people. But if we have the opportunity to do it on our lands, I'm all for that, because I like the San Juan approach where they have down there that satellite Utah State office where they're teaching the kids how to be out in the oil fields and the gas fields and working in these areas. But not everybody wants to be a roughneck. Not everybody wants to be a laborer. I mean, shoot for the stars here, man. You gotta land in the clouds. Go out and find your place in this world. But and we'll be here. The tribe's always gonna be here. You're sure you're gonna miss home, you'll be homesick, but hey, there's something at the end of this, and this for your people to keep moving forward. So that's one of the things that we would talk about. But like I said, with everything that was going on, I hear about Fort McDermott a lot, and I know some folks out there that there's no housing. It's a dry reservation, crime's coming on. I don't know. You have to think about all these as a leader, about how is it really kind of tip the scale to the negative as opposed to the positive. So obviously it's going to help people in the long run, but is there a price to pay for it? Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Gosh, there was so much in there about building relationships and opportunities and really thinking about things from all different perspectives. So thank you to the panelists. Are there any questions out there? Right here.
Yeah, so thank you to the panelists and to you. My question primarily wants to tie in the panel to your presentation. I was curious if you could educate us, so folks that are involved in Utah. It seems like your office at UNR really does quite a bit for the entire state. How do you relate to the Department of Native American Affairs that if I understand correctly is the state agency for Nevada? And then I wanted to tie that back to what Andrea brought up, is it really seems like the LEAD program that you've developed is meeting some of the things you expressed about we need a way to encourage the youth to learn about and carry these ideas back to the nation.
Yeah. So in Nevada, there are 20 federally recognized tribes and 28 communities, bands, or reservations. There's a lot. And so, we do our best to reach out. We have to build a network. We work really closely with the Nevada Department of Native American Affairs. We work with other organizations. We have lots of folks working in different fields and different areas. There's tribal liaisons within state agencies, and so we know that we can't do everything. And we don't need to be the lead or recognized for everything, right? We just want to make sure things get done. And so if there's an opportunity to partner with somebody or connect somebody, that's how we're gonna get things done. I don't care about who gets credit, I don't care what happens, right? It's just like, how are we gonna help our communities? How are we gonna help industry? How do we hook people together? So that's kind of our approach. It takes time. I mean, there are some tribal communities that struggle. There are tribal communities, we haven't been able to get to a meeting in a year because they haven't had a meeting, or there's turnover, or there's something that's going on. And so what we just have to do is we come back around and we'll knock on the door again and say, hey, are you ready? Nope, okay, and then we go to the next organization or community. And so it just takes time. But we can't do it all ourselves. And I think that's why, this consortium of members in the Tech Hub, or this building of partnerships and trusted relationships, it's like that for everything that we do, right? And so that's kind of the approach that we take.
So, having worked with many tribal communities, and some of the people touched on this today, often these groups really lack infrastructure, for lack of a better expression, in a way that I think most of us, even living just a few hours away, aren't aware of. Many of the schools that I work with in tribal communities don't have science teachers until high school, right? So you can't expect them to be interested in STEM jobs, right? Rural Utahns, about 40% don't have access to high-speed internet, which is what you would use to learn about such topics, right? What are, aside from housing, what are some of the other sort of things that corporations or businesses might actually be able to provide to the tribes? What could they bring to these communities as sort of, a way of building that trust and building a long-term durable relationship? I think these corporations might be just drops in the pan for them, right? But could provide those sort of things. What might be some of those things that folks in the room could think about bringing back as a way to kind of move into those communities with good faith?
Yeah, I'm gonna hand this over to Deb, but I just wanna say, I have my ideas, but you need to ask them. I think the biggest thing is you can't just say, oh, there's a housing shortage across the state, we're gonna go build you some houses. Or, we all know you need childcare to go to work, so we're gonna build you a childcare center. That might be true, but you need to ask them, and don't make assumptions about what that community might need. Thoughts?
So, yeah, Jason Walker here. Good question, and I think just right out of the gate, the answer is engagement. Because let's use that, say if there was a lithium mine found at Gunsight Peak in northern Utah, that would be in our area. If a corporation came in there and said, what are we gonna do? I was like, well, what you pass into our territory, there's TERA laws, there's tribal equal rights opportunity laws, which means, there are 5% of, you have to do engagement with us. But also, if you want to get our tribal members engaged, work with the U or Utah State or something like that to where they start building these programs like James was talking about. If there's gonna be engineers, or if it's, for one, ASIS, the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. Okay, yeah, ASIS, it's an ASIS organization. My daughter went through it, and it worked well because she had a cohort of different people from all over the nation, well, essentially it was the West, of equal-minded science, native science students. And when she graduated, they had a placement program, so she did an internship for BPA, but that was her goal. And if corporations are saying, hey, we have a lot of science, engineering folks, or jobs that may be coming to this area, let's engage them, help engage with local universities, and with the tribal council to get our buy-in. So that way I can say, hey, there's some jobs coming in the near future. Let's get you in this engineering program or something that maybe you could be a part of this thing that's taking off. Right now, I send a lot of our kids to business school because, hey, we're entrepreneurs. I mean, we see them every day. They do the traditional work, they do bee working, they do this, they do that. They're entrepreneurs already. They just don't know how to really get going and get off the ground, become more sustainable. Or it's more just a hobby, it could be their place of work. But I would say that would be one of the main things, is getting engaged with the tribe, with some things that are coming in here. Truck driving school, I just heard something about lack of that. We just sent one of our kids to truck driving school. You know, he doesn't want to be an accountant or a welder, I want to be a truck driver, I want to see the West. So we'll pay for that, and we'd have. And, you know, I mean, if that's something that's in the area, come to us and we say, hey, we got these kids that, you know, may want to do that. So that would be my answer to that. Thank you.
I might get on just a second. So every tribal community is different, right? But I will say my experiences out in Nevada has been that it's a lot of just basic stuff. The Duckwater tribe, south of Highway 50, I can't recall how long that road is. It's like 30 miles.
45 minutes.
Yes.
45 minutes.
And it's rough, and it's a dirt road to get out there. And so, you know, you could say, hey, you know, Acme Business, we'd love to have you in southern Eureka County, and you have a workforce with the tribe, but you're gonna have to, you know, fix this road to the tune of, you know, $20 million or whatever, and then they just, yeah, no, we can go somewhere, you know, else. Same community deals with power issues. They're on the end of the line, and oftentimes the power goes out, and they deal with diabetes down there. I can't remember what the percentage is, and I have a diabetic daughter. I know that's a little concerning when you can't keep your insulin cool. And so the problem is that I've noticed is companies, they're not willing to put those funds out unless they absolutely have to. And I get it, I understand. I'm a business owner. I you know, sometimes you want to, you just simply can't. And so, like I say, every tribal community is a little different in that regard, but it is interesting that we do chat with some of them what their biggest desire is. We just want a road that won't beat our vehicles, you know, to pieces. And so it's interesting. I had one more point and it's just slipped my mind, so I guess we'll just stop there.
So since COVID, a lot of these tribal nations actually had the opportunity to get internet and broadband, and then in turn get more in touch with the outer world from their rural communities. So, but it's just like he said, water, roads, power are huge issues on reservations, because once they were established, they were never maintained. And then a lot of these tribal nations also didn't have the funding to maintain them. And we actually, last year, just got jurisdiction over the roads in our community. The county wasn't taking care of them, and we couldn't take care of them because they weren't our jurisdiction. But because of a water looping project that we were doing, we said, well, you know, why don't you just give our roads back? You're not maintaining them, we'll maintain them. We can fast track our water looping project. But then, so COVID provided a lot of opportunities in getting funding for these things for our community. But then the economy happened, and we were ready and set for all these projects, but prices started increasing. So then we only got so far. We went from like A to F, and we can't get to Z because of the money again. But it is just those simple things: water, power, and roads.
And you have to remember that tribal communities don't have tax-based structures like other municipalities or local governments. And so there is a gap in revenue to help support those infrastructure needs. And so that's a huge challenge. All right, any other questions, Chester?
I've observed for a long time how the challenges that are in communities. And one of the questions I've always wondered about is, when you see a young person who goes to, say, the USU Blanding campus and gets a degree in nursing, and they want to go and do that, but yet at the same time they have this conflict that they want to live a traditional lifestyle, that there's a pull back to their own communities where they came from. And you know, we can do career development and all those kind of things all there, but how do you guys see that? Is that a non-starter barrier or is there a way to make that work for young people to go pursue a career and yet still also have ties back to their families and their communities and where they came from?
Yes. I think that, you know, those are some of the challenges that our students face. You have to remember, especially students who come from very rural communities and especially more traditional students, I mean, they have ties to communities that you don't just drop and go to school. I mean, they might have to go home for ceremonies, they might have to go home for funerals, they might have to go home to take care of grandparents, whatever that might be, and that is a cultural thing that students live with, and those are some of the struggles I think that our students have if they go away to school and then they are disconnected or can't get back, and it creates challenges. And so those are things like with our mentoring program, we do check on students like, are you okay? Do you need to go home? Do we need to bring your family here? I mean, what does that look like for you? Because culturally, you don't just stop. And I think that's challenging. Do you guys want to add anything?
One thing that I've heard from students who are like my age and they went out and they got degrees and they wanted to come home to help their people. One, the people didn't treat them good because it's like that crabs in a bucket effect. Like just because they were doing better for themselves, like our people were jealous of them. And it was really weird to me. But then also there were no homes for them to come home to. And that was really sad. So and then that's again where I seem like this endless cycle of like, we can't get these good things in our community because we're not creating spaces for our people to come back and help. And then we're not even treating them good because then we're treating them like second-class citizens or like that they don't matter or they're not from here or they're not connected when that feels like their home, and then they feel like they can't integrate back into the community, so then they leave. And then we lose really good people. I've seen it over and over just in my short lifetime. And so that's why when I was chairman, I'm like, we need to create economic development. One, because we need homes, we need infrastructure, and we need to do what we say we want to do. Send our people off to go get degrees and come back. We're not doing that right now. And so again, we're starting from ground zero of this foundation building of let's create economic development. We need water, we need good roads, we need to build homes, and then we need to create spaces for our people to come back and help like we tell them to do.
Anybody else?
And so, you know, we say that, like, if they go out and they say they get a nursing degree, and they wanna come back to us, we don't have that opportunity. We don't have that health center. But we may have it adjacent to, but it's just like what the chairwoman said, that, you know, sometimes when you're gone for 4 years, 4 years is a lifetime, and you might get forgotten. But there's some tribes in Oklahoma who I've worked with who have a mentoring program. So when they have an economic development business to get this kid that's fresh out of, you know, undergrad or graduate school, they are mentored with them for the next 2 years. So they learn the business dealing on a day-to-day basis for 2 years. And so this person maybe moved on to another project, but that person stays and takes over. So there's that job placement development within some tribes. And that was one of the best examples I seen when I saw it, because man, I wish we had that. You know, because I wish we had something like, you know, I've been on council for 20 years. I'd like to see a younger person see how it is. So I mean, we bring people here. Other tribes bring it here when we meet with the governor's office, and you know, we want them to start getting their feet wet about, hey, someday this could be you. You know, and that mentoring program, I wish we had more. I wish we had the jobs offer every graduate a job when they come back, but fortunately we don't. But with these economic, that's why we as councils are looking for economic development opportunities to help maybe someday have that capacity to say, hey, we have a position for you if you come home. I've done that before, but, I mean, we get our health people, you know, he was a kid when he came to us, he's now in there 12 years, and just kicking butt at that position. But as, you know, one of the, you know, it just happened to turn out that the person that he replaced was an older person. But, I mean, I wish we had a job for all of our graduates, but it's something we deal with.
All right, I actually have one thing to add that I want to share, and our members don't even know about this, so safe space. Our Economic Development Board is new, like they just started, they had their second meeting this year in January, but we are going to integrate a Walker River Economic Development Youth Leadership Advisory Board, and it will consist of our tribal member youth 15 to 24, and so then we'll be able to also, it's gonna be like we're gonna take these members that are outside who have these skills and knowledge and abilities, and we're gonna be like, hey, we want your skills, knowledge, and abilities, and we want to take you under our wing, and we want to mentor you, we want to integrate you in our community as you are bringing that to us to help the reservation build their economy. Just because they live off the reservation, we're trying to bring them and integrate them in the community. So it's another approach that we're gonna take, and we'll see how it goes.
And one more thought, do you see this discussion around critical material, new extraction industries, new processing, do you see those as opportunities for your communities, for new jobs, or not? Or is it a negative?
I say yes. I mean, we need to create all kinds of jobs, right? And I think the reality is our communities need work. Because we're so far out, many are so rural. So if there is a way to figure out what that looks like, and again, I think chatting with each community to determine what that looks like for them. And then individual families need to make choices about what that looks like for them. And the bottom line is people need jobs. And so I know, you know, in McDermott, I know there is a big divide philosophically because of Thacker Pass. And so, you know, have part of the community that's very frustrated and doesn't want anything to do with it. But then you have part of the community that's like, we need jobs, and we need to be able to work and support our families and figure out what that looks like. And so I think the answer is yes. We've just got to figure out what that looks like. All right. Oh, one more question.
I've had the opportunity to be involved with Aspirability's efforts in the Navajo Nation. And one thing that was helpful in this space was to determine an actual job board to find the availability that existed on or off the res, so those that could provide the skills to the individuals that could do, you know, a little bit of a stackable add-on to it. Is that something that could be beneficial to be between the indigenous nations as well as some of the workforce development people, so there could be a knowledge of what's available from a remote standpoint? You have people here like Newmont University that has worked with vets and some of the Native American peoples. Has anyone ever approached this group to be able to take something that appears to be a simple solution, but they've never offered it to the group?
Yeah, so we're actually very blessed in Nevada through Nevada Connect and what's it called? Employee Envy. Good Jobs Nevada. We have a gentleman, Thurman Roberts, and his job is a tribal navigator. So he has made his way across northern Nevada and has worked with all of the tribes and is doing just that, identifying where those gaps are.
Cool.
And what training opportunities they are to fill those gaps, and he has done an amazing job. I don't know what Utah looks like as far as that goes, but he is a great resource if anybody, I mean, we can make that connection if anybody's interested.
Yeah, let's talk after.
Absolutely. So we could probably sit here and talk all day. We appreciate that. And I think lunch is probably close to being ready. We're gonna stop here and we'll be hanging out if y'all wanna chat. And thank you so much to our panel.